Hi guys, and today for Vlogmas I'd like to do an author spotlight, and that is on my girl Elizabeth Gaskell. You guys have probably already heard me talk about her a lot if you have been subscribed to my channel for any amount of time, but I really do love her so much. She is a Victorian author, and she is most definitely my favorite Victorian author, and she's most definitely in my top 5 authors. I think there's so much emotional depth, but also social commentary, and so much to be learned and gained from her books. I also have said before, I find her to be a happy medium between the gothic and really dramatic romanticism of the Brontes, and then a happy medium between the Brontes and Jane Austen, who can be somewhat more restrained and sometimes doesn't have as much wildness as I would like. And to me, Elizabeth Gaskell does have that emotional depth, but she also has this more Jane Austen, somewhat restrained tone that I like. And I just think there's such a great balance in her books, but also what I now say about her books all the time is that they are all so different, and I really appreciate that it's the same lens. We're seeing it through Elizabeth Gaskell's lens, but seeing really different things and just getting kind of her ideas on life and so much. So I'm going to tell you about the Elizabeth Gaskell books that I've read in order of my favorites, from going from my least favorite to my favorite. So of course she's my favorite author, so even though I'm going to hold up this least favorite, it doesn't mean I dislike it. It just means compared to the others, I don't like it as much. And it's going to be kind of shocking on BookTube, but North and South is actually my least favorite Elizabeth Gaskell. I think one of the reasons why it is, in case you don't know about North and South, this is basically a Victorian Pride and Prejudice, and it is about Margaret Hale, who moves up to the north of England to a very industrial mill town that doesn't have much natural appeal to it. It's pretty full of factories and not much beautiful nature to be had, and she moved from the south of England where it was very lush and the pace of life was a lot slower, and it's just very different and hard for her to adjust to. But I think the problem that I have, or the sort of barrier that makes it not be one of my, more top favorites, is the fact that I don't feel that we get to know John Thornton, who is the romantic interest in this, all that well, in the same way that I don't feel I get to know Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice that well. So I think it's simply a personality thing. But I actually would say that her writing is better in Wives and Daughters than North and South. But I did have a fair number of underlining that I did in this, and you can see it got pretty bent up because I was pretty engrossed in it. But it definitely, the reading of this came harder to me than it did in Wives and Daughters or any of her other books. So I definitely look forward to rereading this and seeing how I feel about it upon a reread. The next book that is my third favorite is Cranford, and this is more a novella. And so now, kind of investigating her writing more and seeing that she has a fair number of novellas, I wish those were as popular. I think probably the BBC miniseries that came out a few years ago made Cranford more popular. So hopefully they would make some miniseries maybe out of her other novellas. And Cranford is about small town, lower class England, and there are many unmarried women who kind of run the show in this book. And there aren't many male characters, but it's a fun, different kind of Victorian novel, because I think many Victorian novels are sort of dominated by male characters, and I appreciate that about this. And I will say there's much humor in this. There are some scenes, I'm just thinking of a particular character, Miss Pole, who's very funny, very tightly wound, and was played by Imelda Staunton in the miniseries very well. And I really enjoyed those scenes. Now, this is not all that plot heavy. It feels very different from her books, but I think it has so much charm, and I think actually watching the miniseries first helped me to like it even more. So I think that was an instance where I was glad that I did the miniseries before I read the book. But I do really like Cranford, and I look forward to rereading it in the future. Then a new one that is now my second favorite Elizabeth Gaskell that I very recently read during Victober is Sylvia's Lovers. And Sylvia's Lovers, to me, I said this before, feels like Thomas Hardy and the Brontes and Elizabeth Gaskell all wrote a book together. It has the tragic elements that it has that Thomas Hardy has in his books, but it also has the very romantic and gothic elements that the Brontes bring, but also some of Elizabeth Gaskell's more sensible nature. And this was an absolutely beautiful book. I underline quote after quote, and it is the story of Sylvia, who lives in a shore town in the north of England, and there is a big whaling industry. That's basically how the town thrives. And there is a love triangle. There is a man who is in love with her, who she doesn't love, and then a man who she is in love with, and you can't tell if he loves her. So it's very tragic, but the writing was so beautiful, and I came to really, really love the character of Sylvia. I still think about her, and I still find myself trying to make heads of tails, you know, what was she like? And I think this will make an excellent reread, kind of having hindsight going into it. It will be really interesting to see what I think. And then it should come as no surprise that my very favorite Elizabeth Gaskell is Wives and Daughters. This probably takes a little bit of inspiration from Cinderella in that Molly Gibson is motherless, and when she is growing into a young lady, her father decides that she needs, as a moral compass, a mother to guide her. So he knows this woman who is available, who he doesn't know that well, but he knows she's eligible, and he gets married to her. She has a daughter who is Molly's age named Cynthia, who you don't know at the beginning of the book, and they throw so much chaos and turmoil into Molly's life, and it's just about Molly handling it and how her relationship with her father is altered after he becomes married to Hyacinth. But there is so much humor in this, and this to me has some of the most fully fleshed out characters. To me, the characters in Wives and Daughters are more fully fleshed out than they are in North and South, probably. And like I said, I think the writing is probably better. The one downside to this is Elizabeth Gaskell died of a sudden heart attack right before she finished the ending. So it's probably lacking about 25 pages, but she had already told someone who was going to end up with whom, and she knew how it was going to end. And then I think a good consolation when you finish this is to then go watch the miniseries, where they put a beautiful, beautiful couple of ending scenes in there, and it kind of takes the sting off the fact that she wasn't able to finish it. But yes, I think this is excellent, excellent. It's one of my very favorite books. And okay, on to the Elizabeth Gaskell that I have yet to read. The novels are Ruth. And Ruth, from what I can tell, is about a woman who has kind of hard circumstances and a man who jilts her. And then she's able to kind of, with the help of another family, get herself, you know, back and stable and taking care of herself. And then he comes back years later and he wants her forgiveness. I think that's what I can tell from the synopsis. Anyhow, it sounds very interesting, and from what I hear from Melissa at the Bookish Babbler, it does have a happy ending, and I look forward to reading Ruth. Then another one that apparently Charles Dickens really did not like is Mary Barton. And Mary Barton sounds a little bit similar to Ruth in that there is a woman who just has basically a very hard life, and it's her kind of working against those circumstances and just figuring out how strong she is. And I don't know what kind of an ending this one has, so it will be interesting when I do get around to reading it. But I am willing to kind of take the plunge, even if it is really sad, because Elizabeth Gaskell's writing is just unparalleled, and she's my favorite Victorian author. Another book that she wrote that is nonfiction is her biography of Charlotte Bronte. I think because it's nonfiction, I just don't feel as motivated to read it. So it's not anything I plan on reading in the near future, but maybe, you know, eventually I will read it. But I have all this other Elizabeth Gaskell, all these other ones to read. And then I have a collection of her short stories, and this is called Cousin Phyllis and Other Tales. And I will read the stories that are in it is Lizzie Lee, The Old Nurse's Story, Half a Lifetime Ago, Lois the Witch, The Crooked Branch, Curious If True, Cousin Phyllis. The one that is not in here that I have heard other people talk about is The Poor Clare. So I do have an ebook copy of that on my Nook, and hopefully I could get to that. But from what I could tell on Goodreads, these all sound very varied, like I've said about her novels. So I'm really excited to get to more of her work. I just think that With some authors, once you've read one, you've read them all, but it seems that Elizabeth Gaskell has a lot of variety in her books. So please let me know if you are interested in reading Elizabeth Gaskell, if you have read her, what your favorites are, and I will see you guys for the next Vlogmas video, and have a great day.